the ideas that bind us, that are deep, they're not generally articulated. And so when they're challenged, those who hold them have no idea what to say. And like, here's another example. I like to use this on people who are radically left. It's like, why is slavery wrong? Well, they think, well, God, it's obvious that slavery is wrong. Slavery is just wrong. It's like, okay, fair enough. Why? Well, as far as I can tell, it has to do with the fundamental sanctity of the individual. It's basically a religious claim.
Yeah, you're removing their freedom.
Yeah, and their freedom is an appropriate part of them because they're a part of divine providence. It's something like that. That's the axiomatic claim. Well, if you dispense with the entire religious underlay, which is certainly what you do if you're on the radical left, it's like, well, then why not just use power? If I can make you do what I want you to do, why the hell not do it?
This is how jokes work.
It's like, yeah, but why is it wrong? Exactly.
But this is how jokes work. Isn't this beautiful? It's like you find a way to get a person who is an atheist, doesn't believe in religion, thinks religion is the worst thing in the world, to agree that religion has immense value by getting them to agree that a thing they hate, slavery, is wrong. And then you attach why slavery is wrong to the thing that they also think is wrong. And now and that's not a hard choice, religion or slavery. Great.
Why did you just compare that to a joke? I think you're right, but why did that connection occur for you?
Because you're making people choose. Well, for me, that's how I would enter anything. I would go, okay, there's a person who is not religious. Or we can even use let's person who's not religious. I would like to convince that person that religion is valuable, right? So, and I have bits that I've done about this, right? So what do they hold true? What are their other values? Maybe they're very liberal. Maybe they don't believe in, I don't think you have to be liberal to not believe in slavery. We should all not believe in slavery. But here's another thing that they would hold true. They disagree with slavery. Okay, now if I believe that the reason why man has the right to their I guess, independence and their freedom is because I'm a God-made individual and God would never make somebody chained, then that person has to accept that God is the reason why slavery is wrong, and therefore has to agree.
So there is something definitely there, because a punchline. So there's a whole line of psychological.
We need a punchline still.
Yeah,
we need a punchline still, but that's a premise.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The punchline is what drives it home. And one of the things that I have found, I think that what I do on stage is most analogous to what stand-up comedians do. And the reason for that is that when I do a lecture, for example, or try to answer a question, there's usually an investigation, but it has to build up to a punchline. There has to be a culminating moment where it's driven home, and that's a moment of insight. And what it does is it takes a bunch of information that's sort of been scattered around and brings it together. And everybody goes, aha! And that's very much like the climax of a joke. And it's part of insight. And so there's a psychological literature on insight, and insight seems to develop when a number of things that weren't linked together are suddenly linked together. And you go, aha, that's how all that fits together. And comedians are doing that all the time because
we're explaining the world, and sometimes we're explaining the world in ways that don't really make sense, but they're funny connections. I had one of the earlier jokes in my career that worked was, we were talking a lot about like the oppression of women. And I'm like, okay, maybe it'd be funny if I could find a justification for the oppression of women. So I said, the oppression of women is horrible. Countries that treat women horrible, that's just awful, but they have the best food. So my nobody's ever said, let's go out for a Canadian tonight. Right? So to me, that's like the more equal a country, the worse the food is. And then the more oppressive the country, the better. Like, I think one of the lines was, the more countries like stay in the kitchen, the better the food comes out of the kitchen, Now, these are absurd concepts, but a really funny connectivity, right? I'm justifying something awful, but now all of a sudden everybody in the room is kind of agreeing like, holy shit. Like, I'm not a fan of Swedish food. I'm not a fan of, I really love hummus. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, Norwegians eat fermented shark. Jesus. That's an argument against the equality of women right there. Fermented sharks, man. That's just not a good idea.
So
there's cans of that stuff. I think it's called surströmming. You can't fly on airplanes with cans of that because they explode. So that is not a food you should eat.
So to me, now I don't have the responsibility you have, which is to be truthful and right. So I can dabble in the wrong, and the wrong is so funny. But for me, like, I don't know. I just love this. I love the wrong. The wrong is great, and it allows us to explore ideas. Like, I got a boxing coach, right? And not for anything else other than exercise. I just love to do the sport, right? But and he's from Egypt, and he was speaking to me in Egyptian Arabic, and I thought that, like, curse words are a great way of organizing a society's hierarchy in values, like the different curse words that they use, right? And he was telling me, he'll call me different curse words. He called me mitnaka, right? Which means prostitute. Sorry. Mitnaka means a slut, actually, for lack of a better word. And then he goes, sharmuta, he calls me, which means prostitute. He goes, now listen, outside of here, don't say mitnaka to anybody. That is a horrible word. Okay, you cannot say that. Do not, he's basically, don't call anybody a slut. He goes, you can call people sharmuta, that's not that bad. I go, wait, you're saying slut is worse than prostitute? And he goes, well, sometimes you have to for money, that makes sense. But just for pleasure, what is wrong with you? Go your boyfriend or something. And I thought it was like such a beautiful look into culture. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there are dire circumstances that made it more reasonable to have sex for money because you needed money to survive, maybe you needed to help your family, and that was forgiven culturally. In this, it was like understood. It was like, you don't want to do that, but at least you're doing it to support your family.
Yeah, well, the curse words always touch on taboos, right? And so taboos would be the worst thing in a society. In Quebec, all the curse words are church related.
Tabernacle.
Yeah, exactly. How do you know that? Why do you know that?
It's my job to know these things.